And good afternoon, and thanks for joining us here on BNC Live. I'm Brittany Jones in for Laverne McGee. We're following breaking news. Bill Cosby has been released from prison after Pennsylvania's highest court overturned his 2018 sexual assault conviction. So the 83-year-old has served more than 2 years at a state prison near Philadelphia for drugging and molesting a Temple University employee at his suburban estate in 2004. Cosby's legal team is reportedly on its way to the prison to meet Cosby, who could be back home as soon as today. Cosby was sentenced to up to 10 years and had vowed to serve the entire time rather than acknowledge any remorse over the 2004 encounter with accuser Andrea Castan. And BNC's chief legal correspondent, Dr. Laura McNeil, is here with me now. Dr. Laura, you've been on this all afternoon since this news broke. Obviously, this is coming as a shock to many people. Talk about what this opinion means. What does this decision being overturned mean?
Essentially means, as you stated in your intro, that Bill Cosby gets to go home. It means that the conviction of a guilty verdict has been overturned, not because the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania found that he's not guilty, but because of a procedural mistake that was made in the legal process. And so essentially what that means is the court said that they felt that a previous agreement that was made by the former DA not to prosecute him for criminal charges has to stand. They said that because the new DA said, you know what, I'm going to proceed on and still convict him, meaning I'm going to go ahead and pursue criminal charges irrespective of this previous agreement, and on top of that use statements that were made in a deposition under the guise or the understanding that it wouldn't be used against him later to convict him. And the court said that violates due process, which one of the core things about due process is the process fair? Is this fundamentally fair? And it's not. And even, Brittany, if you, regardless if you agree whether Bill Cosby actually committed the crimes he was found guilty of, no one wants to be in a situation where you're told, Brittany, anything you say won't be held against you, and then fast forward, we changed our mind.
Yeah. I mean, and going back to just even the initial reaction to this, what were your thoughts when you first heard this? Obviously, this, like I said, came as a shock to other folks today.
You know, I was shocked, and the reason I was shocked is because I've been well aware of the appeals process and the fact that Bill Cosby's legal team have been trying to get his conviction overturned. They've gone through every level of the court system there in Pennsylvania, ultimately to today's Supreme Court decision. But because all the lower courts denied their request, found that there was no proof, there was not strong enough evidence that there was an actual agreement not to prosecute. So I thought, you know, surely the Supreme Court is going to feel the same way. And just to give you an example, one of the compelling pieces of evidence that allowed those lower courts to reach the decision is that the first assistant to the DA, who's considered to be number 2 in rank, said, I had no idea of any agreement. He never mentioned to me there was an agreement in place. If there had been an agreement not to prosecute Bill Cosby, trust me, I would have known. I'm number 2 in command. And even irrespective of that testimony, Pennsylvania Supreme Court said, we think there was an agreement, and because of that, we're overturning the case.
So I'm going to ask a simple question that I'm assuming our viewers will want to know at home. How do these agreements exist?
I'm glad you asked that, because the truth is, this is a very rare set of circumstances. Typically, the district attorney, that's your journalistic eye coming in, or instinct, the district attorney works for the Commonwealth. They work for the people of Pennsylvania, and they don't get involved in civil suits. They don't get involved in civil actions like this. They're supposed to pursue criminal action. So the fact that the former DA made an agreement that for a civil process and said, okay, we won't pursue criminal charges if you tell the truth in this criminal proceeding, in the civil proceeding, that's not normal. That is outside the norm. And so obviously there is some politics in place here on why would you not have prosecuted the case when Andrea Castan first came to you within the statute of limitations and said, this is what happened to me. I need you to pursue charges against Bill Cosby. Why would you strike a deal for the civil case to not prosecute? That makes no sense to me. A lot of my legal colleagues are scratching their heads, Brittany, trying to figure out, why would you do that? Your job is to prosecute criminal charges for people that have simply broken the law, not to make deals and say, hey, I won't pursue charges if you go ahead and speak up in the civil proceeding.
And that's what's being echoed across social media today, right? There's so many people posting saying they wonder if it had anything to do with his status, his money, those types of things. And so going back to Cosby's second trial, the judge allowed more accusers to testify to help convict him. The court basically says that testimony tainted the trial, and your legal opinion did it.
It absolutely did, and so very uncharacteristic to have that number. You remember, Brittany, it was 50 plus women testified at that trial, not about the actual case, which was Andrea Constand's sexual allegations that she had against Bill Cosby, but about their own personal experiences. And what happened is when you allow 50 plus women to testify, even though it's not directly related to the issue in this case, the charges in this case, even if the evidence is not that strong, of course, any jury member is going to say what my grandmother always says, where there's smoke, there's fire, where surely there must be evidence to support this, meaning why would 50 women get on a witness stand and lie if it weren't true? And so the Supreme Court said this is highly prejudicial and it should not have been allowed.
And Dr. Laura, prosecutors have not said if they plan to retry Cosby. If they did, this would be for what, the third time? After the first case ended in a hung jury and the second was the conviction, where do prosecutors go from here?
I'm really honestly not sure. I still am trying to be quite honest, comb through this 70-page opinion, but somewhere in the opinion they said, I actually wrote it down here, that Cosby could not have been, he cannot be pursued, prosecuted again. So I need to verify that. But typically in a case like this, a DA can pursue charges again because the overturning of this prosecution wasn't based on the merits of the case. They didn't say you're not guilty. There wasn't any compelling DA evidence, for instance, that proved that he didn't actually assault Andrea Constand. This is different. This was all based on a procedural error. And so because of that, typically in the legal system, you can have another day in court, but you have to do it the right way. You have to make sure that the process is fundamentally fair.
And so going back to this a little bit, Cosby's lawyers have said his conviction came only after he was retried after the Me Too movement. Your thoughts on how big of a role this played in getting that conviction?
It played a huge role. The Me Too movement is exactly what it is, a movement. There was momentum going. There was a push to hold sexual predators, people that have committed sexual assaults, accountable. There was an extra lens of attention. As we say, people were watching closely, wanting to make sure that our legal system protected victims of sexual assault. And so it had a huge influence on those jury members who obviously, most of them would have been aware of the Me Too movement. And this was the first major conviction of with respect during that Me Too movement. So now to overturn this really compromises the foundation of that movement. It sends a message to a lot of those women that we told you, why should we speak up? Because the legal system will fail us every time. Why should we put ourselves in the public sphere, the public eye, when justice won't be served?
And Dr. Laura, he could walk free at any time, at any moment now. What will his freedom actually look like?
Well, essentially, because the conviction has been overturned, he will not have to register as a sexual predator because, again, based on this conviction, he walks free. So reports are telling us that he has been released from the correctional facility that is holding him, and so he gets to go home tonight. Potentially he could have dinner with his wife and family, and literally tomorrow is a new day, as if none of this ever happened.
And to so many people we know, they definitely remember what has happened here. Thank you so much, Dr. Laura. We'll check in with you later in this hour. Well, stay with us. We have much more news coming up after this break. More on this breaking news and also out of Florida. Stay with us. And welcome back. We continue to follow that breaking news. Bill Cosby is now a free man, released from prison after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned his 2018 sexual assault conviction. Now joining us now for an in-depth discussion is Keith Lamar Jr. He's the former Deputy District Attorney of Fulton County, Georgia. Keith, good afternoon and welcome back to BNC.
Well, good afternoon, and I'm happy to be here.
Well, Keith, it's definitely big news today. What are your initial thoughts about the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's decision?
Well, you know, when I first saw the case going on back in 2018, I did find it strange that they allowed so many people to testify. I understood that what was going on in the nature of, as I mentioned earlier, the movement. But in all honesty, you can't bring so many witnesses into a courtroom to testify against somebody that are not that closely related or is super prejudicial, which those ladies were. So I think they brought in too many to count, and I knew that would be a problem going to the appeal.
And so, Keith, talk a little bit about this. Part of the court's decision was based on the fact that a former prosecutor said Cosby's incriminating testimony during a civil deposition would not be used in his criminal case, but later it was. So does that mean this decision to overturn the sentence was based on a technicality?
It's probably based on numerous things, but that's a very big factor right there. So if the state is saying that, hey, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that, then they go in there and immediately do what they just said they weren't going to do, that's grounds for a valid appeal. So I have to blame the prosecutor for that, for not being honest to the defense counsel when he said I wasn't going to use it. That's definitely grounds for appeal.
So taking a look at, the breakdown of the decision, of course, we still have our Dr. Lord that's digging on the opinion. The Pennsylvania court was split on its judgment. 4 judges formed a majority in favor of Cosby, while 3 others dissented in whole or in part. What does this indicate?
Well, it kind of indicates that they were really kind of torn on the decision. It wasn't something that they just knew they were going to do. They probably went back and forth for a long time. A lot of experts, a lot of witnessing. A lot of research, about what was going on in this case. So it kind of lets you know that it wasn't an easy decision. I know his status, but it sounds like they really dug deep into it to come to their decision.
So would you say this is, I guess, an attorney going the extra mile to find something to get him out? I know he had a number of appeals.
Yeah, okay, I'll give credit where credit's due, right? It is going the extra mile. But like I said, when I first saw the trial, you could see there were some big holes there. You could see where the second trial that it came around, they allowed a lot more testimony that normally is not allowed in a trial. You normally don't have that many other witnesses to come in and just give their opinion about this gentleman for a jury to see. Because if you have 12 people saying something about you and these people don't know anything about you, you might be found guilty. So they need to relate and not be overly prejudicial. And I could tell that when the trial happened initially.
And so, you think about the accusers in this case, right? The ones who claim obviously to be victims, and he was convicted for it. So going to that point, do you think that the prosecution is going to make sure that he is retried for a third time?
That's a tough decision for that prosecutor to make. I know we've already done it twice. It's not normal to see it go down 3 times. It's really not. So I don't know if they will do that. I don't think that's any shade to the prosecution. I hope that the victims understand what's going on here. But I don't see why he would do it a third time. But he did it a second time. He might do it a third time for sure.
It typically, in a case with a celebrity as Bill Cosby, do you typically see that they'll keep trying?
At this point, it would seem prejudicial to keep trying. I know he is a celebrity, but if he was not a celebrity, would you try a person 3 times? My answer is no. I don't think that's going to happen. If I've been found not guilty, it's been appealed, now everybody going to your 3rd time, normally you wouldn't see this happen again. But he does have some very large status. A lot of eyes are on this. The whole world is looking at it to see what he's going to do. So he might feel pressure to go move forward, but it's not normal to go to trial 3 times on the same person for the same crime.
Yeah, I know. And like you said, everyone right now is watching this. So throughout his case, conviction, and serving 2 years in prison, Cosby maintained his innocence of sexual assault. Does the court's decision mean anything for the actual crimes he was accused of?
I mean, that for this point, what it means is to the public, as far as the criminal record goes, that he has no convictions of being a sexual assaulter. So that's what it does mean. Now, for public opinion, it shouldn't change anything for the public opinion, whether he's found guilty or not guilty. You have your own thoughts, your own perception of who Bill Cosby is. So you can choose to believe what you want to believe. But for the record, he's now a free man and not convicted of any kind of sexual assault.
So with Felicia Rashad, I want to get your opinion on this. This is something that everybody is talking about right now. I'm looking at her Twitter, and people are basically lighting her up at this point. Basically, she tweeted, if we can get to that tweet for us to read it to you, she basically tweeted that finally a terrible wrong is being righted. A miscarriage of justice is corrected, in part. Your reaction to that?
I'm not mad at her for saying that. I mean, you have to understand who Bill Cosby was to her, who Bill Cosby was to a lot of people. This is what he was known as America's dad, for Christ's sake. I know that people turned their back on him very quickly, but you have to be found guilty in a court of law. So, like I said, court of public opinion is very strong. You can be counseled at any time. People don't like what you have to say. But at the end of the day, that's her opinion. She has the right to say that. I don't believe people should go off of her for saying that because she has a different relationship with Bill Cosby than any of us do. So, when you think about things like that, you can't really get mad at somebody like her. That's like, for her, that probably was like a father figure, a brother figure. So I'm not mad at her statements. And actually, you look at it, the trial, like I said, was very inaccurate how they handled it. You can't bring in that many people to testify against somebody that has no real knowledge, and it's actually very prejudicial. So they shouldn't allow that to come in. And then the prosecutor definitely shouldn't have lied about, well, I don't know anything about the deal or know anything about the civil suit, then talk about the civil suit as soon as the trial starts. I mean, he should have known that from the get-go.
Yeah, well, a number of people are disagreeing and some people agree with you on that. So, Keith, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much for weighing in on this, and we'll see you back here right here on BNC. Thank you.
All right now.
And lots more news to bring you this hour. Stay tuned. We continue with more breaking news when we come back. Welcome back to BNC Live. Today, the House will vote on a resolution to further investigate the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. BNC's White House correspondent Ariana Manise has more from Washington. Good afternoon, Ariana.
Good afternoon, Brittany. That day also, as well as his injuries. Brittany.
And Ariana, Republicans have wanted to move on from the insurrection and get past this and former President Trump's role. Has any GOP member said how they actually plan to vote today?
Yeah, well, Brittany, leading up into this vote today, Republicans in the House, they have been pretty much opposed to any type of commission coming out of the House chamber investigating the January 6th attack. As I mentioned, the vote is taking place right now. So far, we do know that 2 Republicans have voted in favor of this commission, including Representative Liz Cheney. We know she was famously ousted from her leadership position in the Republican Party. She released a statement saying that they should establish this commission as well as hire experienced counsel to continue to investigate the events of that day. Brittany.
All right, BNC's White House correspondent Ariana Manise live for us. Ariana, thank you. And let's go to this. You're getting a live look. Bill Cosby just moments ago. This is his home that we see on the screen. We are told that he just walked into the doors of his home, that is leaving the prison straight into his home after serving a 2-year prison sentence. He is now a free man. We've been covering this since the news broke. Our Dr. Laura McNeil has been breaking down that judge's decision. She will be back here shortly, but he is again a free man. This is a live picture of his home. He just walked into the doors. Much more on this coming up after a short break right here on BNC. Stay tuned. And welcome back. We continue to follow that breaking news. Bill Cosby is now a free man released from prison after the Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned his 2018 sexual assault conviction. And joining us now, actually, we're going to switch gears a little bit. We've already spoken to Keith Fulton. We have BNC's Stephanie Bertini, who's live for us from the building collapse. Stephanie, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Good afternoon.
And Steph, what is the latest at this afternoon? We know so many people right now are still searching for all of those people who are unaccounted for. Tell us what you know now.
So the search continues, rescue efforts continue. We do have an update for our viewers. We talked to Mike Noriega a few days ago on BNC in a live interview, and he told us about how his 92-year-old grandmother, Hilda Noriega, was among the unaccounted. Unfortunately, we've been able to confirm that
made way for his immediate release from prison. We have our correspondent headed to his home as well. Now let's get back to our legal panel for an in-depth conversation of this bombshell decision. Dr. Laura McNeil, she is here with me now to continue talking about this. And Dr. Laura, we know everybody's gonna be talking about this for centuries. Unique case. This is something that, again, I keep saying it over and over again, that people are shocked about. But I want to bring this to your attention, something that I read here specifically. There was no evidence that promise that was ever put in writing. Basically, with this particular agreement, how big of a deal is that if it wasn't put in writing? Is it a shake hand type of thing, or how does this work?
Right, and that's why all the lower courts, Brittany, ruled that the conviction stood, because they said there's nothing in writing. And typically these types of prosecutorial agreements where they agree not to pursue criminal charges are in writing. And the fact that it was not done in writing is very important. And so it's just shocking that they would decide this case, meaning the Supreme Court, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, without something in writing. And even more compelling is the fact that the district attorney at the time's assistant, meaning assistant DA, said that they had no idea or recollection of any formal agreement not to prosecute.
And is this something that people would normally see? To my knowledge, I've never known that you have these kind of off the record agreements, if you will.
Honestly, not in this instance, meaning typically a prosecutorial DA, prosecuting attorney would not be involved to this extent in a civil proceeding where they're agreeing not to pursue criminal charges. It is their job to pursue criminal charges. And the reason this is so devastating, this particular decision, is that in this opinion, the court said that they're barred from a retrial. And so essentially, Bill Cosby is free. And so I just can't imagine what the victims must be thinking that now see this reality that he's home and there's not a whole lot they could do.
And they say that he had to honor his predecessor's promise. Is there ever a chance that sometimes this type of decision can be overturned?
Decision meaning the honoring the previous prosecutor's agreement?
The previous prosecutor's agreement specifically.
No. So essentially, if it's done correctly, these are done in writing. They're certified. These types of agreements are certified by a judge or something. And so it's surprising that they are not, they're honoring something that wasn't done through the official process. And so they could technically try to appeal this Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision to the Supreme Court, but very unlikely that that's going to happen.
And Dr. Laura, you're a prosecutor in this case. What would you do if it were on you to decide whether or not to retry it for the third time?
I think that I would take this as a very big learning experience, one that has dire consequences, and I would make sure that that never happened again. Because the truth is, this DA failed the people of Pennsylvania, and more important, he failed those victims.
And you said that they have to make sure when they decide to do it, they have to do it the right way.
They have to do it the right way. The process has to be fair, and it has to be based on the Constitution.
All right, BNC's chief legal correspondent, Dr. Laura McNeil, weighing in on this for us. Thank you, Dr. Laura. And stay with us. We have much more here. Okay, as the weather continues to remain hot out on the West Coast, the threat of wildfires increases. The biggest fire in California right now is the lava fire, which has grown to over 13,000 acres. Strong winds and dry conditions continue to hamper firefighting efforts. And joining us now from the San Francisco Bay Area is BNC correspondent Ansar Hassan with more. Good afternoon, Ansar.
Yeah, good afternoon. We're in Concord, California, about 30 miles east from San Francisco. Behind me, you can see Mount Diablo, one of the highest points here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Extra cautious, especially this year, given how conditions are so dry. Brittany, back to you.
Sir, there has been a lot of state and federal money given to help with wildfires in California. How has that money been used so far?
Yeah, the fire officials that I spoke with say it's been a big help. They've been able to hire more firefighters, invest in more equipment. The biggest thing they say is they've been able to invest in the drone program. So these drones can go up above, especially in these areas that are really mountainous, and help firefighters plan their attack accordingly. Reporting live, Ansar Hassan, BNC.
All right, Ansar, thank you. Well, coming up in our financial segment, In the Black, we'll tell you about the most affordable LGBTQ plus friendly colleges and universities. Their locations may surprise you. That's next. And welcome back to BNC Live. I believe we're going out live now to Bill Cosby's home where he's believed to be speaking here shortly. So we know that he was released today. No one expected. We've been talking about this all day long since the news broke. Our Dr. Laura McNeil has been breaking down the decision to overturn his conviction. He spent about 2 years in prison, going on 3 years. And also we know that there are several accusers that came out in this case over the last few years. Bill Cosby serving that sentence, more than 80 years old at this point, being released. We saw him hugging family members or whoever it was, greeting him outside of his home as he returned to the house. We were told that this is unusual, but because of his high profile status, you never know what type of person, these type of people particularly will be ushered straight to their homes because of, the media surrounding the case. And I believe this is him up on our screen right now. We're trying to get that feed up for you. But this was big news today. We've been talking about how the Supreme Court decided to make that decision. Was a mentor to other inmates while he was in jail. But if you notice, if you were listening during their press conference, Bill Cosby also didn't speak. He smiled. We saw kind of a smile stare on his face. And when they asked him how is he doing, they just said that his supporters spoke for him and his team, saying that he's just very excited, happy to be home, extremely happy to be home with his family. And they predicted this moment. So there you have it right there. He is being walked into his home right here on your screen. We know he again was released just hours ago and ushered right to his house. And there we see it, folks. We're looking at him walking into his doors. And we want to bring in our BNC's chief legal correspondent, Dr. Laura McNeil. Dr. Laura, obviously this is something that we're seeing all play out right here in front of us. I believe the accusers at home probably are watching too. It's a two-sided thing. You have some people who are celebrating. You have some people who are probably brutally upset.
Yes, and so this has always been a very polarizing situation with this case because he was such an adored father figure on a television show. I mean, I remember rushing home Thursday nights at 8 p.m. to watch The Cosby Show in a different world after. And so a lot of people are still very loyal to Bill Cosby, and they say, and they believe in their hearts that he's not guilty. Then you have the flip side. You have other individuals that believe the testimonies of those 50+ women, believe that where there's smoke, there's fire. And what they see this verdict today, or rather this decision by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, they see it as a huge miscarriage of justice. They see it as a slap in the face, to be quite frank, to the Me Too movement.
And they said today during that press conference, they said he fought for his vindication. We saw, like we said, a number of appeals, which are always expected in these types of cases. So where do we go from here? We see him, he came out with the supporters. They say we fought for this, but what happens next?
Yeah, and so I want to just say briefly, not only did he fight for this, he was denied parole because he refused to participate in their rehabilitation programs. He refused to apologize. So he has been steadfast and adamant about his innocence. And so now in terms of where do we go from here, Bill Cosby gets a fresh slate. He gets a new start on life. He gets to do a new chapter and just enjoy the remaining years that he has. We know that it's not a big secret. He's aging. Visibly, he looks a lot more weaker and frail than he did prior to entering jail, but that's what's next for him. The question is, what's next for those victims and other women? Will they be hesitant, to be quite frank, to come out?
And Dr. Laura, what does this reveal about our judicial system?
Essentially, Brittany, it reveals that it's not perfect. In one sense, it's a good thing because you want the process to be fair. And if there was indeed a prosecutorial agreement not to prosecute Bill Cosby, then he should not have been prosecuted. That's not fair for him to use, for them to use testimony that he gave thinking he had a legal immunity, and he didn't. And so it speaks volumes about the importance of following procedure, following the process, and maintaining fairness. If not, you're going to have a conviction overturned.
And going back to just thinking about the timeline and how we get here, where were we compared to watching him play out on our TV screen, literally walking into his home?
Yes, and so essentially when the verdict, rather the decision came down, the opinion, it was a pretty quick progression to actually releasing him. A lot of times this process takes a lot longer, but I think because he's high profile, it moved quickly.
Yeah. All right, Dr. Laura McNeil here with me now. We'll be back after a short break with more on this. It's a busy news day here at BNC. This is a look from New York City. We're expecting to hear from civil rights attorney Ben Crump representing the family of 14-year-old Keon Harrell Jr., the young man falsely accused by a woman for stealing her phone at a Manhattan hotel back in December 2020. Let's listen in.
They were the customers of the hotel. She was not a customer. I don't think we can make that point enough, that the hotel sat idly by while she accused their customers, who happened to be black and minority, of crimes. And they said, we're going to condone the racism. We're going to condone the discrimination. We're going to condone the profiling. And what did they say, Attorney Fempster? Well, just show her the phone.
Right.
As if we have to prove that we're legitimate. It reminds me of George Floyd, Reverend Al, when he telling the police that I'm not that person. I'm not who you think I am. That's what Keon Harrell Sr. was saying. I won't make my son have to prove he's legitimate just because of the color of his skin. And that's what we're fighting. Attorney Fempster, Attorney Azula, do you all have anything to add? Mr. Ramsey? Okay, at this time, we're going to have you hear from the mother of Keon Harrell Jr., Ms. Kat Rodriguez, and she's going to read a statement from Keon Harrell Sr., who, as you all know, is a Grammy Award-winning trumpet musician who's on tour. And then we'll take Reverend Al and my co-counsels, we'll try to answer your questions about just how significant the day was. Ms. Kat Rodriguez.